guarantees. We've got with us in the studio Ken Newburger, the executive director of the Mississippi Medical Marijuana Association. And let me say this, if you've got questions about the program or want to be part of the conversation, we hope you'll join us on the C-Spire text line by texting 601-879-4395. But remember not to text and drive. Well, Ken, good afternoon. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. Right now, we just started testing medical marijuana this week in Mississippi. Our testing labs finally got their green light, so I'm doing really well. We're really close to seeing this thing come together.
Because that's been the major holdup, right, that there wasn't testing in place?
That's correct. They were waiting to get a lot of the methodology that they were using to test validated by the Department of Health, and then it's finally come through.
And is the testing similar to the dispensary or the production? I mean, are there multiple people testing, or does the Department of Health have one testing vendor that's doing all the testing?
So right now we only have two labs that are actively testing. I think we've got two more that are going to be coming on within the next 6 to 12 months. But they're third-party testing labs that are approved by the Department of Health. However, they are required by law to be completely separate from every other medical marijuana company. They can have no financial or any kind of overlap with other companies.
So you can't be growing or processing and also be a testing lab.
Correct.
If you're a tester, you're just doing that.
That's correct.
Are these big out-of-state? I mean, I assume that there are people in all the places that have a legal marijuana program. I mean, I assume testing is fairly universal?
With one exception, being Oklahoma, I think they're just now getting their testing up and running. They didn't require it at the onset like pretty much everybody else has. But it is pretty universal that you test to make sure that there's some kind of clarity understanding.
And when we talk about the testing, this is for THC concentration principally, or what all are we testing for?
Well, yes. So THC concentration is obviously a huge portion, so that way people know what they would be consuming that could affect them. But also we're testing for heavy metals, pesticides, even the terpenes that affect the taste and smell. I mean, we're testing for more different things within the plant than any other state is testing for.
Really?
That's correct.
And I mean, this is to make sure that this is just giving the patients as much information as they can about what's going to be in the product they're consuming.
Yes, especially when you're talking about the terpenes and the THC and the CBD and CBG, all those different cannabinoid content. That's much more about clarity, but all the other stuff that we test for is more about safety. That's more about making sure that you're not consuming anything that would be harmful to you as a patient.
Okay. And so there was a holdup in getting the testing approved, or just, I mean, anytime you set up a program like this, it takes a long time. But I mean, my understanding was testing was sort of the logjam.
Yeah, it was, because they're under intense scrutiny to make sure that they always perform the same validation of test every single time, and they want to test every single portion of those analytes, those things that we're testing for, are, whether it's mercury or it's all the different pesticides that could be used to make sure that they're low. Those are the things that we're testing to make sure that they always come back the same results. So that way the Department of Health feels confident approving those places.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So now that the testing is in place, what's the time frame? I mean, is anybody, I guess no one is legally selling medical cannabis right
That's
now?
Correct. That's
okay.
correct.
Do you have a sense of when we're going to start seeing dispensaries that are actually selling legal product?
Certainly within the next couple of weeks. I mean, it can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to get through the testing process, and then the Department of Health has to feel comfortable to activate all the cards that are out there. But we're probably looking towards 2 to 3 weeks when we're actually selling. I don't know, because everybody might fail testing, right? I mean, everybody fail, and then we have to start over and grow more. But I hope that's not the case.
Well, and when you say fail testing, that would be, I mean, is that have an illegally high THC concentration, or more, I guess any of that's possible, but is there something in particular?
If anything, ding's high. So having too much THC in the product, you cannot have more than 30% in the raw flower product. So if you test above that, that would be a reason to ding it. If you test, I mentioned mercury, if you have too much mercury in the product, if you come out and it proves that you've been using a lot of pesticides on your product, that could be harmful, and that could make you fail. There are a lot of ways you can fail. And
the pesticide content, is that set out in the regulations?
Yes.
Okay, so there are limits on how much. Yeah. Is there, and I'm going to show some ignorance here. I mean, is there sort of organic versus non-organic cannabis, or since it's all medicinal, it's all organic?
Well, by the definition of organic containing carbon, yeah, I guess, yeah, it's all
technically organic.
Right? But in the more colloquial
in the same
sense,
way I can find $2 bananas and 50-cent bananas, is there something similar here?
People might try to say that. I know that it's been bounced around that since that's a federally regulated word, to try to keep that out of the cannabis discussion, because we need to make it focused on what you're actually consuming, not trying to use the marketing buzzword of organic one way or the other.
That makes sense. Do you know, in terms of how many cards have been issued so far to patients, where we are?
Yeah, we're a little over 1,600, and that's kind of where we're at in the birthing of the program. Is now that we've really gotten past testing, we know product is going to start showing up on shelves in the next couple weeks. It's time to patients to start learning about how to get their card, and we're going to see that really come to fruition as there's product available. But we are doing a series of events with pause pain and wellness clinics across the state to talk about how to get a card. The Mississippi Cannabis Patients Alliance has helped us out as well to get the word of here's who you can come see, here's how they can make their determination of how to get a card, and then some information about what it'd be like going to a dispensary after you are a patient.
So one of the questions that has already come in from a few people on the C Spire text line is, what do you do? I mean, if there's somebody who believes that they have one of the qualifying illnesses, I mean, I think the first question is, I'll break it into two parts. I mean, if I have a condition and I want to know if I'm eligible for medical cannabis, how can I figure out whether what I've got is one of the eligible conditions?
Well, I'd first direct you to either our website or Mississippi Cannabis Patients website. Ours is medicalmarijuanams.com.
Okay.
We have frequently asked questions, which should have all the listing of the conditions. So that's one way to figure it out. And then once you know what those conditions are, if you have it, then first talk to your doctor about it. They may or may not have gotten their training for medical cannabis, and if they did, then that's the conversation you should have with them. If not, talk to them about, hey, I'm going to explore if this is going to be good for me, and talk to a doctor who knows this one way or the other, and we can help you find those.
Okay, but the next step would be to go talk to the treating physician, or
yes,
and if the treating physician doesn't yet have their training, what do they do?
Well, we always recommend, first, like you said, start with your treating physician. But if not, collaboration is key, right? And there are a lot of doctors across the state that have made medical marijuana a specialty of theirs, but they want to work with your physician or your caregiver, whoever that is. They want to have that conversation being more collaborative than not.
Okay.
So I would say start with them, and then once you start exploring it, then reach out to us or reach out to the Patients Alliance and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Who should I talk to next?
And because obviously the statute and the regs lay out very clearly what you can and can't do, and I know the Board of Medical Licensure has its own rules about it. I assume you're going to have some practitioners who, for whatever reason, are going to say, look, and just to give one example, I'm 55 years old. I've been doing this for however long. I'm not interested in going and learning about medical cannabis. I do what I do. Can they say, well, you need to go see Dr. Smith? He's a guy I work with regularly.
Yeah, that's totally normal. I mean, that's a normal medical interaction, even if you went and saw your family.
Else. Exactly.
Right. And you say, hey,
I'm not an oncologist. You need to go talk to an oncologist.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to promote in the medical side of things, is to keep the collaboration between different physicians and nurse practitioners who can help guide those discussions for their patients.
So presumably, whoever your treating physician is, hopefully, if they believe you would benefit from medical cannabis but don't have their license to write cards, they could refer you to somebody who did.
And we've seen that happen quite a lot in the past month. A lot of people have said, I know how to treat multiple sclerosis, but I don't entirely know how it interacts with medical cannabis. So go talk to somebody who does, and then come back to me, and then the three of us will talk about it. And so it's been very nice to see that grow.
Have you all? So they're obviously, clearly based on the way the initiative passed, there's clearly a large number of people who are interested in this product. Are you still seeing? Obviously, there's also a third of people who didn't want to see medical cannabis legalized in Mississippi. Are y'all picking up a lot of pushback still from people?
Not really. We're hearing, story after story of people who are just, it's super exciting for them to go and have this interaction. I haven't heard nearly as much pushback as we did back in 2020.
Okay. Well, Ken, can you stick with us for another
Absolutely,
segment?
Yeah.
Well, y'all, this is Lucien Smith in for Gerard Gibbert here on Middays on SuperTalk Mississippi. Yeah, stick with us after these messages for more discussion with Ken Newburger of the Mississippi Medical Marijuana Association. Well, with us in studio is still Ken Newburger of the Mississippi Medical Marijuana Association. I want to close the loop, Ken, on one thing that we were talking about before the break. If people, and I assume as this program is getting up and running, you may have doctors who don't know where to refer you. So they should probably go to your website, or what should you do if your doctor says you would benefit from medical cannabis, but I don't know anybody who can write you a card?
Right. I would say come to our website or go to the Mississippi Cannabis Patients Alliance website. So it's either medicalmarijuanams.com, which is our website, or mscannapatient.com, which is the Cannabis Patients Alliance. And we can help you find a doctor, or we can, if you really want, just reach out and I'll help facilitate finding a doctor to talk to your doctor about why it would be helpful, because it's going to take that kind of person-to-person discussion to really get the word out.
Now, one of the things, or sort of two provisions, and we were talking about this off the air, but two of the things that are in the law and in the regulations, as I appreciate it, counties and municipalities could opt out. They could say we're not going to be, you'd say wet or dry in the alcohol context. I don't know if there's a term of art in cannabis. You smoke free, but you could choose to be.
We just opt in and opt out. We don't have special terms. It's just in or out.
Well, if you've got ideas for special terms, you can send them to us at the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. But about how many cities and counties at this point are choosing not to have it be legal?
It's about 25%.
Okay.
So it tracks pretty much with the way that the vote went a couple years ago.
Do you sense that some of those counties are going to opt back in at some point once the program gets a little more operational?
I do. I think we've seen quite a few opt in already just in this past year. I mean, I guess it's 2023, but it was a very long 2022. And we saw quite a few places opt back in once licensure started and the regulations were understood, once there was a good understanding of what security standards were going to be. I think that was a big holdup for a lot of people. But yeah, as we see the program really come to fruition, we'll see more places consider opting back in.
Well, and anecdotally, my sense, and you're obviously having orders of magnitudes more of these conversations than I am, but my sense is that some of these municipalities, the concern is that if you do allow medical cannabis to be sold or manufactured in that county, that suddenly you're going to start suffering sort of drug-related crime. You're going to see a decrease in quality of life. I mean, do you have a sense of how realistic that concern is?
Well, I've seen statistics that say otherwise, but I see a lot of statistics, right? and so I think what it really boils down to is how the municipality is managed, right? Do you have good management by the mayor and the board of aldermen or the city council? Do you have a good sheriff in the county? Do you have a good police force? I mean, those are the things that you really consider about safety and drug pervasion into a community. And so I think it really boils down to the local enforcement.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I think sort of makes sense instinctively, right? I mean, I can think of gas stations or grocery stores that I wouldn't stop at, but the problem is not that they're selling ham and bread and gas. It's that there's a law enforcement issue in that area.
Right. And maybe the owners aren't collaborative with the city and they don't have the same level of upkeep for their, in this scenario, gas station. And so that creates an invite for not great things to happen. And so it's the same thing with cannabis businesses. Do you have businesses that could do that? Maybe. But we're trying to create the environment that is very collaborative and keeps cannabis working with localities, so that way it's a healthy environment.
I know there are the legislature's back in session. I've seen headlines that there are going to be tweaks to the medical marijuana law. I mean, do y'all have a position on what needs to be done legislatively this year?
Yeah, we really have two main positions, which is one, we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for patients to get the care they need, right? We want patients to be able to go see their physician or their practitioner, and that is just like getting any other prescription. Their certification is what happens to them. Right now, it's a very onerous process. They also have to have a separate application to the Department of Health. We think that your interaction with your healthcare provider should be it. So we're trying to do our best to make sure that that is the end-all, be-all of how to get a card is your interaction with the healthcare professionals. And beyond that, we want to make sure that all businesses are treated fairly, right? The businesses, the way it was written last year, had a very free market, open, equal treatment for all businesses. Everybody has the same standards. And so we want to make sure that stays where it is.
Okay. And so, but y'all are not pushing for any sort of major overhaul of the act this year?
No. Like I said a couple minutes ago, we just started testing. We haven't sold a single ounce of medical cannabis in this state yet. I think we want to make sure that we get what we've done right and not ask for major changes just yet.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense. Now, a lot of people, and I suspect people are on both. I suspect you have some people who are excited about this prospect and many people who are very deeply concerned about it. I mean, is this a step towards having a recreational or adult use program in Mississippi? And do y'all have a position on that?
So we don't have a position because we've been solely focused on medical. Obviously, some of our members think about it and they want it to happen. Some of them don't. Some of them like it being the medical program and they want to keep it that way because they got into it purely for the patient aspect. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but it's a very nebulous topic, and I know some bills have been introduced. We don't have a position on it at all.
Okay. But am I wrong that you've seen states that have started with a medical program that eventually moved to adult use, recreational, however, whatever the term you'd like to use?
We've seen it happen in quite a few states. We've also seen states put that on the ballot and it fails. Arkansas just last year, the voters rejected it and they said, no, we want to stay with medical.
Okay. Now, again, folks you can always tell when people are very interested in this topic because we're getting lots of feedback on the C Spire text line. But people are suggesting, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going to ask you the question, that Colorado has seen an increase in crime since it legalized marijuana. Do you have any sense of how accurate that is or thoughts on it?
Well, one such example is, drugs involved in vehicle accidents, right? So when they passed the law in Colorado, they said, we're going to start testing every passenger in the car for drugs if there's an accident that we need to test for. So even if somebody in the back seat dinged, positive, it still got logged in the criminal report. So it's kind of hard to look into those statistics of Colorado and really know one way or the other. I think that, people in Colorado have been consistently seeing it become more and more a part of what they do. Now, Mississippi is not Colorado.
Right, because Colorado's full recreational, right?
Yes, it is.
If you're 21, you can buy it.
Yeah, and they're making it a little bit more restrictive on younger people as well in Colorado.
Okay. One other concern that people have expressed is, how do you make sure that the doctors who are writing these cards are bona fide, have a real medical relationship, and you don't end up with the sort of, the doctors who are doing nothing, where everybody knows you can go in there, for lack of a better analogy, when you were in college, and I'm sure neither of us ever did this, but my friends could always tell me what the stores were that, didn't mind if you brought a doctor's note to get a six-pack at 18.
I don't know
if I asked that question as clearly as it might have been.
If I want to answer about my college years. But, it's just like with opioid prescriptions, right? I mean, we've done a lot to add oversight for doctors that are overprescribing. And the same boards that govern the way we handle prescriptions in this state are going to be governing medical cannabis. So, I've got a lot of faith in them. I think we've done a great job over the past couple of years of curbing against other prescriptions. So I think the same kind of malpractice and the same kind of oversight that's been borrowed will be applied very well.
That makes sense. One other question that I have gotten from a lot of people, is it true you can't buy firearm from a federally licensed dealer if you have a medical cannabis card?
So there is a question on there about illegally using medical marijuana. It becomes a problem with the way that the state and the federal laws are at odds, but so is having medical marijuana to begin with.
Right.
So it's all together. There is nothing that would prohibit you from owning guns. In fact, the bill specifically gives protections from the state of Mississippi that says the state will do nothing against your gun ownership if you're legally acting under the state law for medical marijuana.
Okay. And is there, we've only got about 30 seconds here, is there any, I know Chuck Schumer had a bill to legalize at the federal level. Is there any movement on that right now on this?
There was some movement last year to handle the banking aspect and make sure that it's a lot easier for federally chartered banks to bank medical and recreational marijuana businesses. I don't know where that's going. I do hope that that does pass eventually because we need as much aid from the traditional businesses as possible.
Okay. Well, look, Ken, you got time for one more segment?
Sure.
People are clearly very interested in this.
It's a fun topic.
This is Lucien Smith in for Gerard Gibbert here on Middays on SuperTalk Mississippi. With us in studio still is Ken Newburger of the Mississippi Medical Marijuana Association. Somebody on the C Spire text line asked if you were paying to be on, Ken, and Ken is not. I'd asked him to stay on for a third segment because based on the number of people engaging on this topic on the text line, I think we got a lot of listeners out there who want to talk more about the medical cannabis program. And if you want to be part of the conversation, I hope you'll join us. Text 601-879-4395. That's the C Spire text line, and I will do my best in this last segment with Ken to get it addressed. One thing we've talked about a little bit before the break. There are, medical cannabis is in this, or cannabis generally in the U.S. is in this sort of weird spot, as you know, where it is legal in some states, but technically it is illegal at the federal level. And obviously there are people who are arrested and prosecuted on a regular basis at the federal level for violating the law. But as I appreciate it, maybe you can explain this a little bit better. The federal government, the Department of Justice, going back to the Obama administration, has essentially said we're not going to enforce federal marijuana laws if you're in a state that has decided to make some level of marijuana legal.
That's correct. So first under the Obama administration, then the Trump administration, now the Biden, they've consistently said we're going to leave this decision up to the states by not enforcing the law. And there's been a lot of contention in Congress about how to shape the federal law to allow those states to make those decisions, but effectively through the executive branch, nothing's happening. And it's given a lot of clarity and help to companies across the state. I mean, as you said, we're now, I think, at 38 or 39 medical marijuana states. So it's now a majority of states are
39 have some sort of program.
It's either 38 or 39. I know we were 37, and then at least one came on after us.
But a lot. It's not. But, I mean, when I was in high school, I think California had a medical marijuana program, and that was it.
Right.
And the feds were still coming in and busting people in California periodically.
Right. And that's still happening because people are growing illegally in California, even though they have a legal program due to poor oversight, I think, by the state. But, we have more medical allowing states than non by a large margin. So the federal government has consistently said we're not going to do anything.
Which to me seems to me that would make seems to me that puts people in an uncomfortable spot, even if they're legally comfortable. It's just an odd situation where you have something that's
right. And there are things that are getting considered, and part of the reason I get asked all the time, why is the federal government not moving to just blanket say like it's okay and states are going to make the decision? Well, there are things like how do you handle interstate commerce, right? How do you determine what is a medical program, like a true medical program like we have, or a medical in name only like what Oklahoma has? Like how do you make those decisions, and how do you allow states to interact with each other? Because they could just sort it out on their own, but that's very hard when you consider the Constitution and the way that the Commerce Clause works. So there are a lot of things to think through when you craft legislation at the federal level.
And let's unpack the point you made about Oklahoma, because I think it's an important point. One of the major concerns I hear about the medical cannabis program, and at this point, and this is what I've told folks, whether you were for it or against it, and I was personally against 65 in its original form and had concerns about the program, but whether you're for it or against it, it's the law now. 2/3 just about of Mississippians voted for some form of 65. The legislature, based on public preference, has enacted a medical cannabis program. Now our job is to make sure we've got the best medical cannabis program that we can have. That's because right. It's the law. Mm-hmm. But one of the big concerns people have is that you're going to have a medical program that's not really a medical program, that people are going to come in and say, well, my hip acts up when it rains a little bit, and I think taking 4 joints home would really help me. I mean, how do we distinguish, how is our program different from a place like Oklahoma's, and how do we make sure that we don't become a backdoor recreational program where we've told voters that this is going to be a medical program, but really it's, for anybody who wants to use what would otherwise be an illegal drug.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of it comes down to the oversight. We were talking about the way that the Mississippi Medical Board of Licensure, the Mississippi Department of Health oversees this program. But, we're also looking at the way that it's grown and it's made. It's all indoor. It's all has a lot more security. Everything's under a lot more surveillance than Oklahoma. You've got a lot more cleanliness standards. If you're going to process anything in this, you have to also have a food processing permit. So all the same things that go towards food and drug creation in this state to make sure that you're not making anything that's harmful, that's also here. So we have a much higher standard of creation and growth in this state for what companies can and can't do.
Okay.
As opposed to Oklahoma, where you just send in $2,500 and they give you a license.
But what about on the card side? I mean, is it tougher to get a card here than it is in Oklahoma, or do they have?
Yeah, I mean, they don't even have a list of conditions. So yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
just a physician says okay. Yeah. So I assume there you probably are going to end up with some physician that people are going to know that's the marijuana guy.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay. Another concern that I know I have and others have is with edible products, and you hear these stories, where kids are finding gummy bears, and you got young kids like I do. Yeah. They're eating Legos, so finding a gummy bear on a playground,
or cardboard boxes. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So there is this worry you're going to have a child who's going to see something they think is a piece of candy, throw it in their mouth, but they're actually ingesting some meaningful amount of THC containing product. Right. I mean, what are we doing to make sure you don't have that happen?
I mean, you can't buy anything that's not in a child-proof container to begin with. I mean, that's required, that you can't leave a dispensary with anything that's not child-proof. There's a lot of regulations on what can and can't be marketed, and you can't market to children. You can't have anything that would be in a shape that would appeal to children. There's a lot of
So you can't. Can you have the sort of something that looks like a gummy bear?
Yeah, well, you can have. Well, you can't have gummy bears, but you can have gummies. I mean, little like little vitamin gummies that you can 1-a-day stuff that you can take. I mean, that's
right.
That's
but
still
it can't be in the shape of a bear like you could.
Right.
In
yeah.
Colorado.
Tony the Tiger's not out there,
right.
saying eat my gummies. That's what we've done a lot of. But at the same time, it's the same onus that's on people who have prescription medications. Right. I mean, you aren't supposed to leave your prescription medications out on the coffee table for your kids to just pick up. I mean, you need to make sure that any kind of medicine is locked up. If you've got a lockbox or a kitchen cabinet that you put a lock on, that's where you want to keep your medicine, and that's no different than with cannabis.
Okay. Well, and I think you make an important point about what the shapes that are legal, because you're right. I mean, kids will put cardboard and would happily put in an opioid pill if they saw it on the ground. You got to be vigilant, but it hopefully it is helpful that you can't put it in shapes that would normally look like a piece of candy to a child. One question here from the C Spire text line: is medical cannabis stronger than recreational cannabis? Is there a difference in terms of the product, or is the difference really the program?
It's really the program and the oversight. I mean, in fact, the way that we have THC limits in this state, it might actually be a little lower. But in other states that have both, typically what you'll see is that the medical program allows for higher amounts and of THC and of just raw product that you can buy. Usually recreational programs offer less for regular individuals.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of people were asking whether there was sort of a difference.
Yeah, it's the oversight and the way the program's run, right? I mean, and who can and can't get it. That's the biggest difference, right? And the use.
So do you have I know we said there are about 1,600 cards that have been issued. Do you think that number is going to increase as we move forward, or how significant of an increase is reasonable to expect?
I think we're going to see an exponential increase over the next year and a half. If you look at the amount of conditions that we have and how sick our population of people are here in Mississippi, because, we are a very sick state. I don't like saying that, but we do have a lot of people with a lot of chronic conditions in the state. And if you look at that overlap, if a small percentage of those people decide that they also want to have medical cannabis as part of their treatment, they talk it out with their doctor and it makes sense, we anticipate there's roughly 140 to 160,000 people who would qualify.
Interesting. And as dispensaries open, as more people use medical cannabis, you'd expect more people to sign up for it. Ken, you got any final thoughts here? It's been three great segments.
If anybody in the Jackson area is interested, we'll be at the two museums tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the evening talking about, is medical marijuana right for you? We'll have some doctors there to talk about it. We'll have dispensary owners there to talk about how to use it. So please come if you want to learn more. We'll have food and drink for everybody who shows up tomorrow, 5 o'clock at two museums.
And what's your website one more time?
medicalmarijuanams.com.
Well, Ken, thanks for being with us, and thanks, y'all, for listening. This is Lucien Smith in for Gerard Gibbert here on Middays on SuperTalk Mississippi.